Welcome to the Saints Insider Podcast. I am Luke Johnson, your Saints beat writer for NOLA.com and Times-Picayune. I'm joined today by Matthew Paris, our other beat writer. We've been out here the entirety of Saints training camp. Matt, we've been through 11 practices now.
We have, yeah. It's stacking up.
11 practices down. They've got an off day. We're shooting the show on Monday afternoon here in California. They've got an off day tomorrow on Tuesday, and I think 2 more practices to go before they open up their preseason slate against the Arizona Cardinals in Phoenix. We will be out there for that as well. And, you guys can keep track of everything that we're doing over at NOLA.com. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, go ahead and do that. Give us a like, 5-star rating. We would love to hear any feedback y'all have on the show. And, it's been really fun out here so far, man.
Yeah, it's been good. And there have been some interesting developments, stuff that you would think before training camp would have maybe seemed like a long shot or kind of impossibility, and yet it's kind of happening as it's unfolding.
That is why they play the game, my friend.
That's why they have the practices.
A lot of practices, lots and lots of practices. We're going to get into everything that we've been noticing out here. Everybody that has been kind of catching our attention as beat writers. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
Football fans, with the Caesars Sportsbook app, you can be in the game all the time. Seeking instant action? Quick Picks offers you the most popular games and markets, already built for you and ready to bet. Experience the thrill when you stack your bets to create a super parlay. Build bets for your favorite teams and players across multiple games. This season, don't just watch the game. Download Caesars Sportsbook and experience the game like never before.
Okay, so we are 11 practices into Saints training camp. A lot of guys have really been catching our attention, a lot of the stuff they're doing offensively with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. We came into this camp looking specifically for that stuff. And one of the major storylines for us, and I think if you can go by Twitter for Saints Twitter, Saints fan base, would be the performance of the backup quarterbacks, and particularly Spencer Rattler, their rookie draft pick this year. A lot of people were high on him going into the draft. He ended up slipping to the Saints, and people thinking maybe the Saints got a steal. We saw a lot of him at rookie minicamps, veteran minicamp, OTAs, and I think really uneven performance from him in those. Through a lot of interceptions, seemed to be kind of late with the football, but in the span of just a month or two, maybe a lot of improvement from the young player.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he had 6 weeks between training camp and mandatory minicamp, and he looks almost like a different player. I think the things that stand out is that he's now really on time with his throws, that he's not really behind receivers like he was in the spring. I think it's been really impressive how he's kept plays alive in a practice setting. I think that's kind of what I'm most interested to see once the preseason starts, is once he faces a live rush, is he still doing those same type of things where he's getting out of the pocket and keeping plays alive down the field, because he's done that a lot. I think, certainly by the throw we saw today to Cedric Wilson, there was oncoming pressure. I think Colin Saunders wanted the sack there, but he got the ball out just in time and found Cedric Wilson, who was wide open and probably would have gone for a 60-yard touchdown if that had been a real game.
Yeah, and look, 5 minutes ago, maybe you just got done filing your story from Spencer Rattler. It was a big day for him because Jay Kaner, who he's competing for the number 2 quarterback job with, missed today's practice. He had to go get an operation performed on the skin cancer that has kind of formed on his face. That's why he's been wearing a bandage. If you've been watching the photos or videos from Saints training camp, you'll see Jay Kaner with a bandage on the right side of his face. He's got a rare skin cancer that he's dealing with, not life-threatening, but it's something that needs to get taken care of. So he was out seeing a specialist today, missed practice today, and that left the window open for Spencer Rattler to take all the reps of the second-team offense, all the reps of the third-team offense. So let's kind of dig into what we saw today and really at large throughout training camp here. I think one of the things when you're looking at Spencer Rattler, the ability to throw a football really stands out. It looks really good coming off his hands, but I think the athleticism is something that plays in this offense too. Just the amount of movement they have these quarterbacks doing seems like every other pass play is a play action bootleg, and that seems to clear up the picture a little bit for Rattler.
It does. It gets him out in space. It's able to move. He's able to, I think, as he does that, read his progressions quicker. I think that's when we talk about improvements in his game. That's maybe why he's getting the ball out faster now, as he kind of knows where to look and how to read the play. But it is, let's not count out Jake Haener here
For
as
sure.
well, because even though he missed today, I thought he's been having a really solid camp. And it's been interesting how they've been doing this. It's literally every other day with, all right, Jake Haener open camp with the twos, the next day, Rattler, so on and so forth. Why today was, I think, so important for Spencer Rattler is this is the first day he was able to get consecutive reps with the twos, but then also the threes. We counted, thank you for helping me double check, but we counted the number of passing plays that he had in team drills. He had 19 passing plays today. That's a ton for like how these drills go. Normally you don't get more than 7 or 8 in a live rep setting. So he got a ton of work today, and I think that's going to be really beneficial for him in the long run, especially if he wins this job.
15 for 19 is what we ended up charting him as today in team drills. And one of those incompletions was a drop by another player who's actually, I think, been pretty impressive so far in a limited viewing window for us. And that's Samson Nacua, the older brother of Los Angeles Rams star Puka Nacua. Just continuing, I want to get to Haener in a second, but continuing on with Rattler, we talked a little bit about his summer and some of the difficulties he had, where you could see the arm talent play out. But I mean, you need a lot more than that at the NFL level. You need to process, you need to get the ball out on time, and you absolutely cannot be late. It is like rule number 1 for NFL quarterbacks is don't be late on your throws, because these athletes out here are all world class and they will make you pay for that. So what do you think when you're looking at a young player develop really quickly? What do you think kind of goes into that, in making him able to kind of get out here and see the things unfold quickly and make those quick decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pedigree goes as part of it, because even though he was a 5th round pick, that 3 years ago he was considered maybe to be a top 5. I wonder if the reason he's able to improve at the rate he does, maybe that's why he was so evaluated highly to begin with. Maybe some of those traits exist and why he could maybe be a steal. The thing I'm interested in is, once the games begin, if you look at his college tape or just even read his college stats, he took a ton of sacks last year. I think he was sacked 42 times, somewhere in there. It was like 5th most in the nation, and then 31 the year before that. So sack rate is actually a very bad precedent for college prospects. Like if you have a high sack rate in college, good chances are you'll have a high sack rate in the pros. Like it's not always on your offensive line, but I think Rattler can make up for some of that is because of how mobile he is with his legs, and I think we've seen that in Saints camp.
And I think this is also one of the things you're trying to coach out of him is some of the big play hunting.
Yep.
Where you hold on to the ball a little bit too long, hoping for something to open up, and you maybe trust the fact that he does have a great arm, maybe trust the arm a little bit too much. And Dennis Allen brought that up today. Look, Spencer Rattler has not been perfect in this training camp. He's had his ups and downs for sure. And when he is having his downs, often it's those types of plays, holding on to the ball too long, waiting for something to open up. And then when he sees it, he tries to go for it. Maybe a little bit too often. It's, maybe they want to take some of they like the reward, but they want to take some of the risk out of the equation with him, I think.
Right. Though at the same time, when you have to play fast, like there was this situational period in practice today where they put 1:15 on the clock. They said, all right, go get us in field goal range.
Yeah, it was 1:15 on the clock. They had the ball at their own 30. They had one timeout.
Down two
in the fourth quarter.
Right. And first 3 throws, bang, 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 completion. The 4th throw was an incompletion, a great play by Kool-Aid McKinstry. But and then from there, but they were already in field goal range there. So they just ran it a few more times to drain down the clock. So it was really impressive. Like watching the first team, Garrett Carr, who had a solid drive, they ended up, getting the game-winning kick, whereas Blake Grupe with the second unit missed it. But Carr was a lot more methodical on that drive, taking the check down right away. I think his first 2 passes. I think that might be a more experienced thing as well. But at the same time, I think you saw some of Spencer Rattler's fearlessness or confidence just by being able to get the ball out so quickly on those 3 throws.
So we will see Spencer Rattler play probably a lot in the preseason game at Phoenix. He's looking forward to that because he is from the Phoenix area. That's where he went after veteran minicamp to go train and be ready for training camp. But we will also see a lot of Jake Haener, assuming everything went well with his operation, which we don't know yet, but that's the assumption. And I think Haener's had a really solid camp too. There's been days when he's looked like the best quarterback on the field. I don't think either of these two guys at any point this year are going to unseat Derek Carr unless everything just goes completely off the rails. But I thought it was interesting today to hear Dennis Allen say they got to prove they can be a number two, because I think we've seen a lot of really good things out of both of them. But they want to see this in the live game action, and it's an area where Haener struggled last year, and admittedly, he's playing in under kind of a difficult situation, knowing he was going to be suspended. But the game looked a little fast for him last year, so I'm really interested to see how these two look in preseason action. I think I'm actually a little bit excited for a preseason game.
Yeah, same here. And I think actually maybe one of the more interesting quotes I've heard all off season was Jake Haener was talking to our Jeff Duncan about how last year in practice, one of the reasons he shined in training camp and OTAs is because he had the practice script. He knew what the defenses were going to run, and so he could see the defense ahead of time. And once the live action started, he was kind of overwhelmed that way. This year, they're running things a little bit differently. I think more traditionally how the NFL does it is that now Clint Kubiak doesn't show what the defense is going to do. I can't see the script of what defense, what coverage they're in. So that's requiring the quarterbacks to run, to read in real time. And but Haener has had a really impressive camp, like you said. I mean, he's definitely been, I think, the more accurate quarterback from Rattler. It seems like this precision-based offense really suits him well. It's funny. It's both of these. This offense suits both of these quarterbacks for different reasons.
It's absolutely right.
It's for the legs for Rattler and the rollouts, and the timing for Haener.
Yeah, they are two completely different players, but I think they both looked really, really good in this training camp. And I don't think there's much of a chance, in my opinion, that they decide they need a veteran quarterback to be their number two. I mean, one of the first players they released in this training camp was Nathan Peterman, who was pretty clearly the number 4 quarterback, even though he was the only backup with a lot of NFL experience on the roster. So just excited to see who's number 2, because number 3 probably isn't going to be dressing on game days. It's going to be somebody they're counting on to be there in case Derek Carr gets hurt. Okay, let's move on a little bit. I still want to talk about another offensive guy, though. And this is somebody who really especially caught my eye today in practice, but I think has looked really good throughout, and that's Chris Olave. And look, we know he's a good football player, and we've talked even on this podcast about how he wants to go from really good to great and to be considered one of the best wideouts in the NFL. We know that he added muscle this offseason. He focused on his play strength, which I think has been a weakness for him in the past. We know he's talked about wanting to be a more consistent player after he had that big lull in the middle of last season. But man, today he was targeted 9 times, I think, in the practice. He caught 8 of them, and there was some of these routes where, guys had absolutely no shot trying to catch up to him. So I want to know, I wrote about it in my observations today. You can go read those at NOLA.com, but I kind of want to know what you've seen out of Chris Olave so far.
Yeah, I think Spencer Rattler put it really well. Chris Olave doesn't work with the twos a lot, but when he does, Rattler makes it a priority to find him. And he's that type of receiver for New Orleans. I think he's going to be, especially given the concerns about this wide receiver room in general. And, there are a lot of talented receivers in the NFL right now. And I think that's kind of what stands out about Chris Olave is, as productive as he has been, he's been a little bit overlooked, but I wouldn't say underrated just because of how many good receivers there are. The onus is on him to take that another step, and he's talked about wanting to do so, but he looks strong. He looks like a favorite of Derek Carr's. That's what stood out today, is just the offense was basically, when he was in there, it was the Olave show. And I just think there's a comfortability with Carr and Olave right now that maybe wasn't there last season.
That's the thing that really stood out to me too. I think we all went on into this year thinking a lot about the yards after the catch. Olave's talked a lot about that, about getting the playmakers the ball in space. But really, when it comes down to it, that Olave is going to be he is an exceptionally fast player, one of the fastest players in the team. He's got that going for him, and it's a really lethal combination with his route running ability, which is really why the Saints drafted him in the first place. very smooth when he's running his routes, and very hard to cover for that reason. So those two things, speed plus route running, make him hard to stop. We haven't seen like a lot of the yak stuff in this training camp, but I think what we have seen is that thing that was kind of lacking at sometimes last year, and the thing that got caught on cameras all the time with Derek Carr and Chris Olave, pointing at each other and yelling. I think we see the connection is really smooth between them. Not a lot of balls on the ground whenever Derek Carr is targeting him. And then after it, when the second team is often on the field and Chris Olave and Derek Carr are often off the field, they're right next to each other talking through stuff. So I think that's the thing that's really stood out to me between Chris Olave and Derek Carr in this training camp is building on the connection and then taking it to the field.
And I texted this to you the other day, but there was that clip of Chris Olave going around, and it was him doing some training camp interview, and they asked him about, is there a play this year that tells you guys are going to be really good? And he was kind of sheepish and said no, and then like spliced with the video was a missed pass from a Panthers game, and it kind of went viral on Twitter. But if you ask players about, hey, do you remember an individual player, if you're like anecdote hunting, is you're just not going to get the response that you want. I mean,
especially from Chris Olave.
Yeah,
he's just not that kind of guy.
It was much more of the context of the interview rather than how Chris Olave feels about Derek Carr, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if Chris Olave wanted to, he could have said it, and we haven't done a podcast since then. But, I mean, Derek Carr had the best throw out of any quarterback in his training camp a couple days ago when he hit Olave for a 55-yard touchdown. It was a beautiful play, and that's the sort of thing that should get Saints fans excited. And if Olave wanted to, he could have mentioned that play. But I think that they run. I mean, they've probably run like 600 plays from scrimmage in this training camp. There's been a lot of good ones. There's been a lot of bad ones. Picking one single play out of there just at the drop of a hat to say, yeah, this is why we're going to be good, is just like, I don't think I would be able to necessarily do that either.
No, I couldn't name one.
And I'm literally watching every play.
Right,
and they're watching every play on film. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you on that. We kind of felt that way in the moment.
Yes.
I mean, I just think Olave is going to be awesome this year. We did that over under pod. I think I might have undersold what his production is going to be. Obviously, like, there's no Rashid Shaheed in camp right now. I think he's missed 3 straight days with a hamstring tightness. They're being very cautious with him. And I think he was looking really good before that. Not a lot behind those guys. Not a lot of consistent production from the guys battling for wide receiver 3, 4, 5 spots, outside of maybe Mason Tipton, who I think has really done a nice job making the case for a roster spot to this point, but pretty clearly going to be 12 and 22 commanding the show there. And I think Olave is just really setting himself up for a monster year as long as he can stay healthy. Okay, we're going to stick with the offense here. One of the biggest questions going into this training camp, and I think really even throughout it, has been the offensive line. It's been a rookie at left tackle who's a college right tackle. It was a failed left tackle who they're trying out at right tackle. It was maybe a second-year player who has 18 NFL snaps on his resume, taking over as starting left guard, and it was a new scheme. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this could go. We've been out here for 11 practices now. You've been to almost all of them, and like, where do you think this offensive line stands? And what's kind of your vibe on those guys?
I would say it's still a little concerning, just based on, it seems like every 4th or 5th play is good for at least one meltdown on the offense, like at one spot. And maybe that's just football. Like, not the best offensive lines aren't going to give it up at the rate, but it's just one of those, like, you just notice it more when it's Trevor Penning or even Talise Fuaga. Like, him going against Chase Young, I think it's been impressive the way that Fuaga specifically has been able to learn each day. I thought last Wednesday's practice was maybe the worst he looked, but Friday he was a lot more consistent. Still kind of uneven in team period, but had some great one-on-one reps about them. But I just think it's unsettled right now is because you have those question marks at the tackle, and then Luke, who's going to play left guard for this team? Because that's wide open right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, they've they were rotating Saldiveri when he was healthy before he left with a calf injury. They were rotating Saldiveri out with Lucas Patrick. And then since Saldiveri's been hurt, they've been rotating Lucas Patrick with Landon Young, with Oli Udo. I mean, you could legitimately say there's 4 guys in the mix for that starting spot right now. So, that is definitely a concern. But I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there. It is still unsettled, and I think still remains to be seen. But I think they've performed maybe a little bit better than I thought they would. They had a couple really rough days in pass protection, especially. 2 just back-to-back days where it seemed like every other play there's somebody in the defensive backfield for a sack or disrupting a pass's timing. They've cleaned that up since then. And I think they've done a really, really nice job opening holes for the run game. Today, notwithstanding, it was kind of a rough day for the run game today. I've been really impressed with Fuaga, and everything you hear about that guy from literally everybody you talk to, or they're saying he's going to be a stud from day one. I think I believe that. I'm having a harder time believing the really positive comments about Trevor Penning just because we know
because you have eyes.
Come on, man. Man. He has not been that bad. He has not been that bad. He's not been perfect. He's definitely, I think, an improved version of the player last year, which he has to be.
Yes, yeah.
He's never going to stay on the field if he's not. He seems much more comfortable at right tackle. He seems better in his pass sets. I watched him on a number of reps today. And he was stonewalling everybody who was going up against him. There was not a lot of pressure on the quarterback today. No. The only thing that gives me a little bit of a pause on Trevor Penning is everybody says we need to build his confidence up. So like them going out there and saying, well, actually he sucks. Not going to do that. So I take a little bit of those comments with a grain of salt. I believe him with Tali Fuaga. Maybe that's not fair of me,
right?
But like Fuaga's look, I think excellent from the jump. Left guard is the most concerning spot for me, and you can hide a guard a little bit easier than you can hide a tackle, especially in pass protection. But I mean, 4 guys for one spot, and I don't know if any of them have really. I don't think any of them clearly have separated themselves if they keep rotating guys in and out there.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, it's not. It's just like the reason it's also confusing too is because like Young and Udo are your swing tackles, so it's good to have that positional flexibility, but you also kind of just want one guy to like claim that spot and be really good at it. And I don't know if Lucas Patrick is a better center or guard. That's kind of where like. I just want to see so many teams talk about just having the best 5 guys out there. And I don't know right now who are these best 5 for New Orleans. I think that's kind of why we need to see the games and why there are so many practices left to evaluate that.
I do think it's pretty clear, though, that
4
of those positions are set.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We kind of talked about maybe Oli Udo beating out Trevor Penning in training camp.
No, that hasn't been a competition.
That hasn't even remotely been a competition. Penning's gotten basically for the last 10 practices every single first team snap. So I would anticipate he's going to be your starting right tackle. When you're watching this scheme and the way the offense, I think scheme matters. Well, from an offensive line perspective, pass blocking is just kind of in a lot of ways it's one-on-one, especially when you're in drop back passes like this running game. I think you can see the benefits of the scheme when these guys are out there playing it.
You can, and I do think it was a little rougher today. Like you said, there was no Alvin Kamara, which is a big reason why. But I even think a guy like Jordan Mims, who had been having a really phenomenal camp, he had gotten swallowed up a little more. The linebacker play, I think, has been really impressive for that. I think that has a lot to do with shutting down the run. But yeah, I actually think a lot of this, both the run and the pass, kind of comes down to Clint Kubiak in terms of what personnel he wants to trot out there and how he disguises that for pass protection and run blocking. Because today you saw a lot of heavier personnel looks, which I think actually helped with the pass protection. There was 2 tight ends on the field a lot. There was Jamal Williams being the pass protector, from a running back position. And so I do think there's things Kubiak can do to mitigate that. It's just how often are you doing that, and what are you taking away by doing that? Because even last year, Pete Carmichael, there's that stat in the Football Almanac book about how I think they ran the fourth highest amount of like jumbo sets with like a sixth offensive lineman or an extra tight end on the field, but yet the pass protection still wasn't very good for a large chunk of that season.
Okay, let's close it out here with maybe the most concerning thing about the first 11 practices of training camp, and that is the injury list. I mean, I write these observations, you write the observations, and we always include who missed practice. It seems like that list is getting longer and longer and longer. Got about a 75-word paragraph in there just discussing injuries. So, you kind of did a little bit of an analysis on this. What did you find looking back at these injuries here?
Yeah, so after today, there's 22 injuries through camp. That's not including rest days, but even guys who have been released like Jermaine Jackson or Tommy Hudson's now on IR. It's been 22 injuries, a lot of big names, but at this point last year, there was about 16 or so. So it's not that significant of a number, but you factor in the weather of where we are in sunny California, and you think that the Louisiana heat would like maybe get guys more injured. That was kind of the theory we were tossing around, that maybe this move out west would be good with them. But football is still a violent and physical sport, and you are seeing that out here in California.
I will say, though, that a good number of these injuries are soft tissue injuries. Yep. We have seen not many guys who I think have suffered an injury that you would call serious. I think we were maybe a little bit concerned the other day when Dennis Allen said Peyton Turner had a toe injury and Nathan Shepard had a toe injury. A lot of times toe injury, it sounds innocuous, and then you do a little bit of research on turf toe and you're like, that sounds absolutely disgusting and terrifying. It's like dislocating a toe. It's all pointing the wrong way.
Yep.
You have to get surgery to fix it. Neither of those things were toe turf injuries. Both of them were back out there at practice. But we've seen a lot of stuff like this. It's groin and hamstring and calf, hip flexor, and that's what a lot of these injuries predominantly are, which is good in a sense.
But
that maybe the most amount of time you could expect the person to miss at that's 6 weeks maybe. Hasn't been a lot of stuff where you could really expect a guy to be out 2-3 months. But I mean, a lot of these guys are really, really important players who've missed extended periods of training camp. Kendre Miller has missed basically 11 practices. Brian Brzee missed 3 practices. Nick Saldiveri's been out for something like 7 or 8 practices. Demario Davis hasn't practiced in a while. Rashid Shaheed, Paulson Adebo, Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, these are big name players who are missing extended periods of time.
No, yeah, and I thought Dennis Allen's response was interesting, and I understood where he was coming from. If you want to build calluses this time of year to prepare yourself for the regular season, and that as training camp goes along, they'll kind of reduce the workload and the physicality there. So, I mean, I get them kind of pushing the limits right now, but at the same time, it would be nice to see how this defense goes with Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo. Like, we were watching Shamar Jean-Charles, who's had a nice camp, out a lot with the ones today. And, if the Saints are actually in that position come the regular season, I mean, I think that's going to spell trouble for them.
I agree. Well, the Saints do have tomorrow off. They'll be back out there on Wednesday. Maybe we'll see some of these guys return. We'll keep an eye out for it. And you guys should keep an eye out for it too over at NOLA.com. We'll be back out here with another pod on Wednesday. Probably be me and you again, because I think Rod Walker is going back to the Heat in Louisiana. So please stick with us. We have a bunch of great stuff coming for you on NOLA.com. We will see y'all later this week on the podcast. Again, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you Wednesday.